Welcome to Tales by View. Before we begin, please subscribe to help us grow, and tell us in the comments what country you're watching from. We love to hear from you. They say the people who leave carve the deepest scars. But what happens when someone stays, even when it costs them everything? Mara learned young that love doesn't always promise forever. So when Michael came along, quiet, patient, willing to bleed for her in ways her own father never did, she didn't know whether to run or to finally stop running. Love is not enough to heal years of walls built high and hearts locked tight. But can one act of sacrifice change everything? Mara was only 10 when her father left. He didn't shout, didn't slam doors, didn't break things the way neighbors' fathers did when they were angry. He just packed a small suitcase, folded his shirts with quiet efficiency, and zipped it shut while the house held its breath. Hannah, Mara's mother, stood by the kitchen sink with her hands wet, the kettle boiling over on the stove, steam fogging up the window above the sink. Her face didn't move much as she watched the man she had loved for years turn into someone she couldn't recognize. Mara sat on the edge of the worn sofa, her feet barely touching the floor. "Where are you going?" she asked, her small voice cutting through the air like a paper tear. Her father didn't meet her eyes. "Somewhere to think," he said, gripping the suitcase handle like it might anchor him to the ground. He kissed Hannah on the cheek lightly, the way people close books they never intend to finish, then looked at Mara one last time before walking out the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt like the house exhaling for the first time in years, but it was the kind of breath that left you emptier. That night, Mara heard Hannah crying in the bathroom. Not loud cries. The kind of crying you do with your face buried in a towel, where sound can't carry but the ache fills the walls anyway. The next morning, Hannah's face was calm, as if nothing had broken. She made Mara breakfast, tied her daughter's hair neatly, and walked her to school. When neighbors asked about the missing man, Hannah smiled politely, the kind of smile that looked like a locked door. And Mara, sitting quietly at the edge of every room, learned something that day. People leave, and sometimes the ones left behind pretend the ground didn't just fall out from under them. Mara grew up watching her mother hold everything together with both hands, as if the weight of the world rested only on her shoulders. Hannah moved through their small apartment like a conductor of invisible orchestras. The clink of dishes, the hum of the washing machine, the shuffle of bills neatly stacked on the table. Mara would watch from the doorway, noticing the way her mother's back stayed straight even when her eyes flickered with exhaustion, the way she forced herself to smile at the neighbors as if nothing had ever happened. Hannah took extra shifts at the clinic and the grocery store, folding laundry late into the night, her fingers stiff from constant motion. She began wearing lipstick again on Sundays, though she no longer had anywhere special to go, as though painting it on her lips could somehow make the empty spaces in their home smaller. She never remarried, never brought another man home, and never spoke about why she chose solitude over second chances. Mara sometimes imagined a life where her mother smiled freely, held someone's hand in the quiet living room, or laughed without measuring her breath, but those were dreams she knew she wasn't supposed to speak. One evening, when Mara was 15, the question that had been building for years finally slipped past her lips. They were folding sheets together, the crinkle of fabric echoing in the small room. "Mama, don't you get lonely?" Hannah paused, holding a bedsheet halfway to the closet, her hands trembling slightly as if the question had touched a hidden nerve. She stared at Mara for a long, deliberate moment. "Lonely," she said slowly, almost tasting the word. "No. Being lonely with the wrong person is worse than being alone." Mara didn't fully understand then. She watched her mother's calm face, the set of her jaw, the quiet fire in her eyes, and somehow felt both comforted and unsettled. The words carved themselves into her mind like initials on bark, a reminder that strength sometimes meant standing alone. By 18, Mara made herself a promise. She would never let anyone make her feel small, not like her father had made her mother look in the doorway that day he left. She would build a life where absence didn't fracture her, where she could navigate the world without leaning too hard on others for balance. She moved to the city for college, taking a tiny studio apartment that smelled faintly of paint and the lingering aroma of old books. She got a part-time job at a small clothing boutique, learning the subtle art of charm without attachment, the power of a measured smile and a steady gaze. At night, she kept a small notebook, a ledger of sorts, where she wrote down lessons she didn't want to forget, the rules she believed would keep her safe. Rule 1. Never need anyone too much. Rule 2. Leave before you're left. Rule 3. Love is a risk. And risks are expensive. Sometimes she tested these rules in small ways, going out with men she didn't intend to love, observing their behavior, the way they sought dominance or approval. It wasn't cruelty. It was practice, a way of understanding how fragile hearts could be handled and how to protect her own. Each encounter left her more certain of one thing. Vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford, not yet. By the time Mara was 20, the city had taught her lessons no ledger could fully contain. She moved through streets lined with glass towers and coffee shops, where conversations were currency and attention was a fragile form of wealth. She had grown comfortable with her solitude, but curiosity, that quiet, insistent itch, sometimes demanded an answer. She went out with men occasionally, not for love, but to explore the boundaries of control, to see if she could navigate desire without giving away her power. A dinner here, a late-night walk there, a few hours in laughter and flirtation, each encounter was measured, observed, and filed away in her mental ledger. Some men tried to impress her with status, others with stories of adventure. Mara watched their movements, their reactions when she hinted at distance, the subtle changes when she refused to lean in emotionally. She learned to read dominance, the way one hand brushed another, the way words weighed against silence. It wasn't cruel. It was survival, practice in understanding intimacy without surrender. Yet, beneath the carefully curated walls, Mara felt the tension of contradiction. Each fleeting connection reminded her that she longed for the steadiness she had never known, the kind of care that didn't vanish when the night ended. She carried her mother's example like a compass, a reminder that strength and dignity were not the absence of vulnerability, but the mastery of when to show it. It was during one of these quiet explorations of life and human behavior that she met Michael. Unlike the others, he didn't play the games she had come to expect. He wasn't loud, he didn't boast, and he didn't seek to impress. He simply existed in the same space as her, listening, observing, staying. And Mara, so used to testing others, noticed immediately that he never wavered, never faltered, never demanded what she wasn't ready to give. For the first time, she encountered someone who understood absence and loss because he had lived it himself. Michael had loved and lost, had been left in moments of need, and bore his past like a quiet scar. He did not try to undo her defenses, but he did not retreat from them either. Mara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, the possibility that someone could remain not out of obligation or fear, but out of choice. And yet, even as she felt that stir of curiosity, Mara reminded herself of her rules. Vulnerability was dangerous. Love was expensive. And no man, no matter how steady, could undo years of self-imposed armor overnight. Months passed quietly, each day measured by routines and small victories. Mara managed work, errands, and her life in the city with practiced efficiency. But life has a way of reminding us how fragile even the strongest rhythms are. Then one day, Hannah, Mara's mother, fell sick. At first, it was subtle, a persistent cough, a touch of fatigue, a reluctance to get out of bed. Mara urged her to rest, tried to keep her hydrated, but the symptoms worsened. Tests followed, then scans, then consultations that brought a growing sense of unease. When the word pneumonia finally settled over them, it felt like dust in an already crowded room, unwelcome and unavoidable. Mara became a constant presence at her mother's side, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs beside the hospital bed, juggling her part-time job, bills, and a torrent of prescriptions and instructions. Her life shrank to the size of hospital corridors, fluorescent lights casting everyone in pale, tired tones. One evening, after days without proper meals and nights without sleep, her body gave out. She collapsed in the corridor, the hard tile pressing against her cheek as the world tilted and the sounds of alarms and hurried footsteps became muffled echoes. When she woke, it was in a bed, her skin pale and clammy, her vision swimming. The doctor's voice was calm but urgent. "You're severely anemic," he said. "We need to perform a transfusion immediately." Panic rose in Mara's chest. She hated owing people, hated the feeling of needing help, hated the vulnerability that had become unavoidable. But Michael was there before fear could take over. He didn't hesitate. He checked the forms, confirmed the blood type, and agreed to donate. His calmness steadied her. Hours later, after the transfusion, Mara's eyes fluttered open. She saw Michael sitting beside her, a small bandage on his arm marking the sacrifice he had just made. Something inside her cracked, a wall that had stood since her father left finally showing its first fissure. No one had ever stayed like this before. Not for her. Not like this. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Michael leaned slightly closer, his voice soft and certain. "That's all you need to do right now." And for the first time since she was 10, Mara let herself cry. Not quietly in a hidden room, not with her face buried in a towel, but openly, letting the tears fall where they would, letting herself feel the depth of exhaustion, relief, and something she hadn't dared name, trust. After the hospital, Mara couldn't ignore the truth anymore. She replayed every moment in her mind, the cold efficiency of the doctors, the harsh fluorescent lights, her own body giving out from exhaustion, and Michael, quietly present, offering a part of himself so she could stand again. What bigger sacrifice was there than your own blood? What greater proof of love than showing up without hesitation when the world seemed to crumble around her? Her father had left without a backward glance. Men she had briefly entertained had come and gone, leaving only lessons in control and distance. But Michael, he had stayed. That evening, Mara wandered along the edge of the city's riverwalk, the sky painted in bruised purples and golds as the sun dipped low. She clutched her coat tighter, though the chill in the air didn't matter as much as the turmoil inside her. Finally, she turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words tasting unfamiliar, fragile. Michael's gaze softened. He stopped walking and looked at her fully, his hand brushing hers in a small, grounding touch. "Of me?" he asked gently, a quiet patience in his voice. "Of needing someone this much?" she confessed, her throat tight, her heart pounding. He reached for her hand, holding it with steady warmth. "Mara, needing someone isn't weakness," he said. "Choosing to stay, that's strength." In that moment, Mara felt years of armor loosen, the careful boundaries she had maintained since her father left finally giving way. She saw the truth clearly. Love could be terrifying, but it could also be unwavering. That night, under the dying light of the sun, she decided she would give him a chance, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but because for the first time, she wanted to. They married in a small, sunlit court ceremony. The walls were pale, the air warm with mid-morning light spilling through tall windows, and the faint smell of polished wood and paper filled the room. There were no flowers dripping from ceilings, no loud music, no audience of hundreds. Just Mara, Michael, two quiet witnesses, and Hannah sitting in the back row, her expression soft, proud, and tender. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the folds of her dress. The decision to insist on a prenup wasn't about mistrust. It was about the remnants of old wounds, the cautious armor she had worn for years. She wanted to feel safe, even while she dared to step fully into vulnerability. Michael didn't flinch. He signed without hesitation. His wealth was independent, stable. He didn't need her money, he only needed her heart, her presence, and the choice she was giving him freely. When the papers were signed and the clerk gave a quiet nod, Michael reached out and slipped a simple, elegant ring onto her finger. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It didn't need to be. No performance, he whispered, his thumb brushing hers, steady and grounding. Just us. Mara's chest tightened with emotion, tears prickling her eyes. She smiled, a fragile, radiant curve breaking through years of guarded walls. Just us, she repeated, letting the words linger like a prayer and a promise. Hannah rose and embraced her daughter, holding her a moment longer than necessary. You did well, Mara, she murmured against her hair. You found someone who stays. Mara felt the weight of those words, the acknowledgement of her journey, the recognition of her courage, the validation of every boundary she had set and every risk she had dared to take. As they stepped out of the court, the sunlight spilled across the steps, warm and golden. Mara took a deep breath, the air carrying the hum of the city, the scent of spring rain lingering on the pavement. For the first time, she felt it, the ground steady beneath her feet, the quiet thrill of having chosen love without fear, and the serene knowledge that this time, someone had truly stayed. Michael squeezed her hand gently as they walked together, their steps falling in sync. Mara glanced at him and saw not just a partner, but a steadfast presence, a patient heart, and the proof that love, when it arrives as it should, could heal old scars, build new trust, and finally allow a soul to rest. For Mara, the world felt wider now, full of possibility and quiet, unwavering joy. And in that moment, she understood something essential. True love wasn't loud, it wasn't performative, it simply remained. Thank you for watching this episode on Tales by View. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep bringing you more powerful stories like this one. See you soon.